Hey there, welcome to Books Podcast. In today's episode, we are here with another amazing book, Show Your Work, by Austin Kleon. And in this podcast, we will learn about how sharing your creative process can help you build an audience, connect with others, and grow your work. Stay tuned as we explore practical tips on self-promotion, collaboration, and embracing creativity in the digital age. All right, let's dive in. We're going behind the scenes today, exploring the creative process itself, not just the finished product, but that journey. We're using Austin Kleon's Show Your Work. I think this is going to be big for our listeners.
Oh, for sure. I think they'll be surprised at how powerful sharing even the little parts of your process can be.
Okay, so that lone genius myth that Kleon talks about, I've totally been there, thinking I had to have it all figured out before I could, share anything.
Yeah, it's a common one, that idea. The solitary creator.
Yeah.
Struck by inspiration, just working alone until, boom, masterpiece. But Kleon really points out that's not how it happens. Not really.
So what's the alternative? Is there a better way to think about it?
He talks about this idea of genius. Basically, it means great ideas. They don't just come from one person. They come from a whole community, a network of creative people feeding off each other, bouncing ideas around.
So instead of that lone genius, we should be connecting, like finding our tribe, the people who get our passions.
Right. And it doesn't even matter if you're an expert. In fact, Kleon says being an amateur, that can be an advantage.
Hold on, I always thought amateur was a bad thing. How can that be good in a creative field?
Well, think about it. Amateurs, they're usually more willing to, experiment, take risks. They're not so afraid to fail. They put their work out there, even if it's rough. And they really want to learn from the feedback.
That makes sense. It's like that quote, right? Beginners have so many possibilities, but experts, they get stuck. It's about that open mind.
Yeah. Like this story Kleon tells about Bernard Sumner. He's the lead singer for New Order. He saw the Sex Pistols play back in the day. They were, objectively terrible. But their energy, raw and unfiltered, it made him want to get up there and be terrible with them.
That's awesome. It shows, how inspiring someone else's process can be. Even if it's not perfect, right? It gives us permission to just go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's Kleon's point. It's not about waiting. Until you're an expert or your work is perfect, show up, share the process, connect with people along the way.
Okay, so let's say we're embracing our inner amateur. What's the first step?
He says, document your process.
Oh, interesting. So instead of focusing on that final product, we're capturing the journey. How do you do that?
It can be simple or complex. Keep a journal, scrapbook, take pictures, videos of your work, voice memos, heck, even just scribbles on a napkin. Just create a record of it, even if it's just for you.
I love that. And these days, we all have our phones, right? We can be documentarians of our own work.
Right. And you don't even have to share it publicly. Just documenting it can help you see your work more clearly. You notice patterns, connections you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
It's like you're having a conversation with yourself. But on paper or a screen, I can see how that helps.
And then when you are ready to share, you've got this whole archive,
All right, so we're documenting. Then what? How do you actually start sharing your work with everyone?
Kleon says, share something small every day. He calls it a daily dispatch from your creative world. Way more interesting than a resume.
It's like giving people a peek behind the curtain, right? Kleon talks about Ze Frank. When he interviewed people, he cared more about what they did that weekend, not their old work. He wanted to see their passions now, not just past achievements.
Exactly. What you share daily, it can be anything. Your influences, works in progress, lessons learned, or even just a thought you had. It doesn't have to be this huge thing. He even says, set a timer for 30 minutes, get something out there, then get back to work.
I like that. It's like a little dose of creativity for you and for whoever sees it. But how do we choose where to share? Is it all about Instagram and TikTok these days?
It depends. Your field, your audience, filmmaker, YouTube or Vimeo, probably, visual art, maybe Instagram, Tumblr, writers, lots of them are on Twitter. It changes all the time, Experiment, see what works.
Like trying on hats. And Kleon has that example of Tommy Edison, the blind film critic. He shares photos on Instagram, shows you can find your own way, use your voice in unexpected ways.
And speaking of voice, he says something really good. The only way to find your voice is to use it. Don't worry about sounding perfect or super professional at first. Talk about what you love. Your voice will come out naturally.
Like anything else, right? The more you do it, the better you get.
Exactly. And he tells this powerful story about Roger Ebert, the film critic. He lost his voice, because of cancer. But he found this new way to express himself, to connect with people. Through blogging, social media, it shows even when things are tough, there's always a way to share your voice.
That's really inspiring. So we've talked about the amateur thing, documenting, sharing daily. What else can we learn from Kleon about showing our work?
He's big on storytelling. He says even if you're just sharing little bits of your process, you got to present them in a way that grabs people, makes them care.
Because, come on, a list of facts is never as interesting as a good story, right?
Exactly. And luckily, he gives some good advice. He says to borrow from classic story structures, like Aristotle's beginning, middle, and end, or John Gardner's where a character wants something and has to overcome obstacles. He even mentions Emma Coates' fairy tale structure. It's like Mad Libs for storytelling.
Okay, but how do we actually use those structures to tell the story of our work, especially if it's, not even finished?
Kleon's big on talking directly to your audience. Clear language. Respect their time. Give them context. Think about the details. It's like putting little museum labels next to the things you share. He even reminds us, use spell check.
Yeah.
Proofread. It's crazy how often we forget the basics.
Oh, totally guilty of that. Good reminder that even when we're sharing things that are raw and unfiltered, we can still be intentional about it.
Exactly. And this leads to something else Kleon talks about. Don't be human spam.
Okay, this has got to be more than just sending junk email. What does he mean by that? Give me the real definition.
Human spam, in this context, are those people who only talk about themselves, their work, their achievements. They don't want to listen. They're not engaging. They just blast out their message, hoping something sticks.
Ugh, I've seen those people online. They suck the life out of every conversation. How do we avoid that?
He uses a great story about a music producer, Adrian Young. He found a collaborator, someone to work with, just through a Twitter conversation about soul music. They connected as fans first, which led to this really cool creative partnership.
That's awesome. It reminds me that sometimes the best connections come from unexpected places.
Exactly. Be a fan first. Engage with people. Share their work. Contribute to the communities you care about. Be what Blake Butler calls an open node. You give and you'll get back.
So it's not about playing the social media game. It's about real relationships based on shared interests.
Right. And Kleon's got some practical tips. Don't be creepy. Don't be a jerk. Don't waste people's time. Don't ask for too much. And never, ever ask people to follow you back.
Solid advice. Okay, so we're putting ourselves out there, sharing, connecting. But let's be real, not all the feedback is going to be good. How do you deal with criticism?
Kleon uses this great analogy from Mike Montero, a designer. He says the best thing he learned in art school was how to take a punch. Critiques were harsh, but they taught him how to be tough, how to develop a thicker skin.
Okay, so how do we learn to take a punch when it comes to criticism?
Kleon has some good tips. First, relax. Breathe. Remember, criticism, even when it's rough, it's rarely the end of the world. It's often just one person's opinion. You don't have to take it personally.
That's easier said than done, but I get it. You have to separate your work from, you as a person.
Exactly. The more you put yourself out there, the more you realize criticism can't really hurt you. It might sting at first, but it can't take away the value of what you've made or your passion for making it. And sometimes you can even use criticism, like embrace the things people hate, push those elements even further.
That's a pretty pump rock way of looking at it, but how do you figure out what criticism is even worth listening to?
Good question. Kleon says to consider the source. Is it coming from someone who actually cares about you and your work? Or is it just, a random internet troll? You got to learn to tell the difference between real feedback and just plain negativity.
Because they say troll's gonna troll.
Right. And his advice for dealing with trolls: don't feed them, block them. Delete mean comments. Don't waste your energy.
It's like cleaning up a mess, right? You wouldn't just let it sit there, do the same thing online.
Exactly. Clean it up, move on. You could even turn off comments. You control your own space online. And remember, not all feedback needs to be public. You can ask people you trust, or just let your work speak for itself.
That's really empowering. You get to choose how, when, and who you share with.
Yes. And you don't need everyone to like what you do. Focus on connecting with people who get it, who appreciate your vision.
Okay, that's great advice. Now let's talk about the big, scary S word, selling out.
Yeah.
How does Kleon deal with that?
He's real about it. Artists need to eat, like everyone else. He quotes Ben Shahn, an artist. He said, an amateur is an artist who supports himself with outside jobs which enable him to paint. A professional is someone whose wife works to enable him to paint.
Huh. Kind of funny, but it makes you think about where the money comes from, right? A day job, a patron, someone supporting you.
Right. And Cleon's not saying there's something wrong with making money from your art. He actually challenges that whole selling out idea. He quotes Bill Withers, the musician. Withers said, "We're all entrepreneurs. To me, I don't care if you own a furniture store or whatever, the best sign you can put up is sold out."
I love that. It's about seeing your art as valuable, something people actually want.
Exactly. And to illustrate that, Kleon uses a really interesting example, barbecue. He tells his story about Aaron Franklin, the guy from Franklin Barbecue here in Austin.
Oh, I've heard about that place. People line up for hours. What's barbecue got to do with art and selling out?
Well, there's a lot of competition in the barbecue world. But Franklin, he's totally open about sharing how he does it. He even made a YouTube series where he shows people every single step. How to build the fire, how to smoke the meat.
Wait, he's giving away his secrets?
Totally. He loves barbecue, and he wants to share that. And he gets that teaching people doesn't create instant competition. You can watch all the videos you want, but to really master barbecue, that takes years.
It's not just about knowing the steps, right? It's like you got to have the feel for it.
Exactly. And when you share what you know, you're not just teaching a skill. You're inviting people in, to your world, your process.
It's like saying, hey, this thing is so cool, I want to share it with you.
Right. And Kleon goes even further. He says businesses should learn from this, out-teach their competition.
Out-teach them. What does that mean?
It means being so generous with what you know that it becomes the best way to market yourself. Think about it. When you share valuable stuff for free, people start to trust you. You become the expert, and it builds a community around what you do.
Makes sense. People are drawn to people who are willing to share and help others learn.
Right. And teaching is a form of creating, too. You take what you know and you shape it into something that others can understand.
It's a cool cycle. You create, you share, you teach, you learn, and you do it all over again.
And in that process, you connect with people for real. You attract an audience that cares.
So teaching is how you avoid being human spam. It's about giving people something valuable, building a relationship.
Exactly. And that's important, especially online, where it's so easy to just get lost in the noise.
Yeah, it's not about shouting the loudest. It's about making a real connection.
And speaking of connection, one of the coolest things about Kleon's book is how much he talks about finding your tribe, your knuckleballers.
The knuckleballers, those people who get you, who understand what you do.
He compares it to knuckleball pitchers in baseball. They're known for being willing to help each other out, share tips and tricks, even though they're competing against each other.
It's like they get that they're all in this together, trying to keep this rare, weird skill alive. It's really cool.
And a good lesson for all of us. Finding your knuckleballers, those people who really get your work, can make all the difference.
So how do we find those people?
Kleon's big on being active online. Find the communities that are into the same stuff you are. Forums, Facebook groups, whatever. Follow people whose work you admire. But don't just lurk. Talk to people. Share your thoughts. Ask questions. Support other people's work.
It's like being a good citizen, but in the creative world.
Right. And you never know what'll happen. You might meet some amazing people.
And what about meeting people in person?
Kleon's all about that too. Meetups, conferences, any chance to go from online to offline. He even says, if you've got online friends in the same city, just ask them to get coffee.
I've made some of my best creative friends online. And it is different when you can actually hang out with someone.
Totally. You can tell more from their body language, their voice, stuff that you miss online.
It's like you can only really connect with someone in person, those shared moments of laughing or even just being quiet together.
Exactly. Sometimes the best connections happen without even saying anything.
This has been great. I'm really fired up to go find my knuckleballers and connect with people for real. What about you? What's sticking with you?
The thing that's hitting me the hardest is how creativity isn't this solo thing. It's about sharing your work, connecting with people, embracing the messiness of it all. And honestly, that's what makes it so fun.
I couldn't agree more. I'm ready to ditch that lone genius idea and be part of something bigger. But hold on, we've got more to talk about. Welcome back. I'm still thinking about embracing that messy creative journey. We've got our journals, we're ready to share. But how do you go from just documenting to actually building an audience?
Well, before you go crazy with social media, Kleon says you need a home base, a place where people can find you no matter what happens with algorithms or, whatever app is hot next week.
You mean like a website, right?
Yeah.
Not just Instagram or whatever the flavor of the month is?
Exactly. Social media. Think of it like renting an apartment. Easy, but you're at the mercy of the landlord. A website, With your own domain name, that's like owning your own little creative embassy. You're in control.
Ooh, I like that. Your own corner of the internet, where you make the rules.
Exactly. And Kleon says everyone, no matter how tech-savvy they are, should get a domain name. It doesn't have to be fancy, just your own space.
You know, I think a lot of people, me included, put off making a website. It feels intimidating. But the way you're describing it, it sounds kind of exciting.
It is, and think about it.
Yeah.
On social media, you've got character limits, algorithms. On a website, you curate things. You tell your story the way you want to.
It's like a social media post, it vanishes. But a website, that's more like a museum exhibit. People can keep coming back.
Exactly. And here's the cool part. Your website can grow with you. You can add new work, update your info. It's a living, breathing thing.
Okay, I'm convinced. But what if you're just starting out, don't have tons of finished projects yet? What do you put on your website?
This is where sharing your influences comes in. Kleon thinks they're super important. Your tastes, your perspective, all that shapes your work.
So you're saying we should share those influences just as much as our own creations?
Yeah. Share a book you loved, a quote that blew your mind, an artist you think is amazing. He even says, be honest about your taste, even if it's, a little out there.
Embrace the geekiness. Love what you love.
Exactly. It's those unique influences that make you unique.
That makes me think of this story Kleon tells about Nelson Molina. He was a garbage man in New York City, and he made this whole trash museum from stuff he found on his route.
Oh, that's such a great story.
Right. He was like an archaeologist of garbage, finding these little treasures.
And Kleon says we can all do that. Be curious. Pay attention. Find inspiration everywhere.
Like seeing the world with new eyes. Right. Finding the beauty even in ordinary stuff.
And trust your gut. Don't be afraid to say, I love this, even if nobody else does.
That's so important. It's our differences that make us interesting, that let us bring something new to the world. Okay, so we're documenting. We've got our website. We're sharing our influences. What about connecting with other creatives? Kleon talks a lot about collaboration, right?
He does. And that's where finding your knuckleballers comes in. He uses that term for like those special people, the ones who share your weird obsessions, your creative quirks, and they're willing to share their secrets, help each other out.
It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Exactly. And, I've been thinking about my own knuckleballers, the people who really get what I do, even if they're doing totally different stuff that keep me going, when I start to doubt myself.
It's huge to have those people. But how do you even find them? Where do you start?
Kleon says get involved in communities online, the ones that are about the things you care about. Forums, Facebook groups, follow people whose work you love, but don't just watch. Jump into the conversation. Share your thoughts. Ask questions. Help people out.
Be a good citizen of the creative world, basically.
Right. And you never know who you'll meet.
Yeah.
Some really cool connections can come out of that.
And what about going offline? Does Kleon talk about that?
Oh, yeah. He's all about it. Meetups, conferences, anything where you can actually meet the people you've connected with online. He even says if you have online friends in the same city, just invite them to hang out.
That's a great idea. I've met some of my closest friends through online stuff, and it is different when you can actually be with someone.
Totally. You pick up on so much more. Their energy, how they say things, stuff you can't get through a screen.
It's like you can only really connect in person, sharing a laugh or even just, being quiet together.
Exactly. Sometimes the most meaningful stuff happens without words.
This is so eye-opening. I'm ready to go out there and find my people. What about you? What's standing out to you the most?
I think the biggest thing for me is this. Creativity doesn't have to be lonely. It's about sharing, connecting, embracing the chaos. And honestly, that's what makes it so much fun.
I totally agree. I'm done with that whole lone genius thing. I want to be part of something bigger.
Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive on Show Your Work. So inspiring, right?
Yeah.
Ditching the lone genius thing, embracing community.
Yeah, it's amazing how much energy comes out when you focus on collaborating instead of competing.
Totally. But, okay, practical stuff. How do we actually share our work well? Build an audience without becoming, human spam.
Good question. Kleon's got some good ideas there. He talks about thinking like a teacher.
A teacher? I thought we were talking about artists, creative.
Right, but he says the best way to get people interested in your work, build real fans, is to share what you know. Teach people. Be generous with your skills.
So it's about building that relationship where everyone respects each other.
Yeah. He uses that barbecue example again. Aaron Franklin from Franklin Barbecue. tons of competition, but he's super open about how he does it. Made a whole YouTube series showing all the steps.
Hold on, he's giving away his secrets. Wouldn't you want to keep those to yourself? You'd think so, right? But he gets it. Teaching people doesn't mean they're instantly competition. You can watch all the videos, but to really master barbecue, it takes time, dedication.
It's more than just knowing the steps. It's like the feel, the experience.
Right. And when you teach people, you're not just showing them a skill. You're bringing them into your world, showing them what you love.
It's like, hey, I think this is awesome. Check it out. That excitement can be contagious.
Totally. Kleon even says businesses should think this way. Out-teach the competition.
Out-teach? What does that even mean?
Be so generous with what you know. It becomes your marketing. You share great stuff for free. People trust you more. They see you as the expert. And it builds community.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're drawn to people who are willing to help you, teach you.
Right. Think about it. Teaching is creative, too. You're taking your knowledge, shaping it so other people can understand.
It's a cycle, isn't it? Create, share, teach, learn, then do it again.
And while you're doing that, you're building real connections, attracting people who actually care about what you do.
So that's the key to not being human spam. Give people something valuable. Build a relationship.
Exactly. It's a good thing to remember, especially online. There's so much noise.
It's not about being the loudest. It's about connecting.
And speaking of connecting, one of the best things Kleon talks about is finding your tribe, your knuckleballers.
The knuckleballers. Those people who get you, understand your work.
He uses that analogy of knuckleball pitchers. You know, in baseball, they're famous for helping each other out, sharing tips, even though they're competitors.
Like they realize they're all in this together to keep this weird, special thing going.
Yeah, it's a good lesson. Finding those people who get you can make such a difference.
How do we find those knuckleballers, though?
Get involved in communities online. Find the ones that are into what you're into. Forums, groups, follow people you admire. Don't just lurk, though. Talk to people. Share your thoughts. Ask questions. Help people out.
Be a good creative citizen, basically.
Yeah, you never know what might happen. You might make some incredible connections.
And what about meeting up offline?
Oh, Kleon's all for it. Meetups, conferences, anytime you can go from online to in person. He even says if you got online friends who live nearby, just invite them for coffee.
I love that. I've made some close friends online, and it is different when you can actually hang out.
For sure. You pick up on so much more when you're with someone. Their energy, how they say things. You miss that online.
It's like you can only really connect face-to-face, those shared moments, you know? Laughing together, or even just being quiet together.
Exactly. Sometimes the best connections are the ones where you don't even need to talk.
This has been so great. I'm so ready to find my knuckleballers and connect with people for real. It's been a real game changer for me, exploring all this with you.
It's been fun talking about all this.
And we want to leave everyone with a question to think about. What's one small thing you can share from your creative process this week? And where will you share it? Keep creating, keep sharing, keep connecting. We'll see you next time. And also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Books Podcast for more such amazing podcasts.